The lesson.
Oh yeah.
Now we're talking, the mid to late 80s. And from my knowledge and understanding, around maybe late 80s, early 90s is when you started to hear or see 73A, JBL, NA, the prominent
NA
crews.
NA, I reckon those guys I kind of met in the 90s, but late 80s, like some of the 73A guys, before they were 73A, had a crew called CSI. And one writer who was in at Rust put me and Risk into that crew. So these guys would come down to where I was living in Mount Gambier, hang out, people like Tense, I don't know, Sway, Waste, all kinds of people. Foe would come down, not that he was 73A or CSI back then, but, Foe, Rank, Plea, who was Manet, a heap of people came down, would visit and stuff.
So prior to 73A being 73A, a lot of those dudes were CSI.
Yeah, I don't know how many of them were just 73A,
but some
of the guys I knew became
okay.
73A.
And then you got put on...
I was in CSI before 73A was around, and then what happened when I finally moved up, and then there was a period where I didn't see anyone for a long time. Risk caught up with them a bit more than I did, and Lace, who was a Mount Gambier person as well, she would catch up with Waste, and those guys were sort of kept in contact. I actually moved to Melbourne for a period. So I went from the country to Melbourne and was there for a while, and eventually had to move back to SA, had to leave and come back to SA. And I lived back in the country for a while, and then I boogied up to Adelaide. About 90, I reckon, I moved here.
Okay, and then when that happened, you got put on to CSI.
No, this was in the 80s. This was like 87 when they'd come down to see us. So I moved, it's a bit jumbled up. So basically when we put in CSI, it might have been 87, and we did a bit of stuff with that and with those guys, and then I moved to Melbourne. I got put into MSA, which is Melbourne crew. Similar interests with music and the way we looked at stuff and what we're interested with those guys, got on really well with them all. So I was put into that crew and hung out with them a lot when I was living in Melbourne, and met other people obviously along the way. But Boots and I would actually go to Melbourne a bit from the country, like catch a bus and then a train to get there, and stay at people's houses, and we'd met up with heaps of riders. It was crazy back then. There'd be 30 guys on a train with a beatbox, jumping off one line to another line, and insides and popping doors open, and everyone piling out in the yard and running through the yard. It was crazy. It was just never seen anything like it, and dudes were getting up. It's like 30 guys with markers. I'd seen similar stuff in Adelaide in 85, 86, where we'd all go to the bench at Myers, and then groups would just walk around, getting up all through the city. Half the shops weren't open on the weekends, after Saturday, 12 o'clock. So I was lucky. I got to sort of meet a lot of really cool dudes at an early age. But I kind of kept to myself a lot as well. I kind of kept in contact with certain people and tried to disconnect from the negative. There was some idiots writing, basically some thieving, deadhead kind of, not very intelligent dudes, and they're not around now, you know what I mean? So I avoided all that bullshit that went with it and just stuck with what I was interested in, which is pushing style forward. So I wasn't very good at tagging or anything like that. All my friends were way better. My thing was more about developing letters, but I like to do throw-ups and freights. That was one of my favourite things ever,
And when you talk about, I guess people coming into the graffiti thing that you try to stay clear of. One thing that Fo said in his interview, which I thought was really, real interesting, is he said when NWA come out, shit shifted, where graffiti was obviously influenced by that. And then the criminal element sort of started to come into it.
Yeah, that's actually true, because we had the radio station, I think, started in 86, and we're playing lots of sort of older kind of hip hop, all kinds of stuff, hard to explain without listing off names, like UTFO and I don't know, you know, a lot of the street sounds, electro compilations, a lot of that sort of music. That's what the sort of stuff I liked, which is more the electro outlook, or they call it freestyle, some of it. That's the stuff I enjoyed. More electronic, hard hitting, lots of stabs and break beats, and, you know, the rapping was sort of second to the music in a way, that they were such good rappers and the music was so good that it just sounded awesome. This is way before the days of just swearing over the mic for attention, that kind of bullshit. So yeah, what happened, we noticed that there was a big stagnant period sort of between all these amazing records coming out. There was a bit of a stagnant period where things sort of went a bit, I don't know, just a bit ordinary with the music side of it. And then, you know, it went from Ice-T, which was great, Rhyme Syndicate, all that sort of stuff. All of a sudden, went from that, which was kind of like a gangsterish type rap, to Schoolie D, which was fucking incredible. You know, I still listen to it this day. You know, and then it kind of went to, I suppose, the 7A3 kind of sound cooler than Cali, and then a lot of that kind of era, and then the NWA stuff come out, Eazy-E, all that kind of gear, and we loved it, you know, at the time. It was great, but I do think it had a lot to do with people going from expressive sort of stuff within hip-hop, say dance culture, expression in fashion, writing, and MCing and DJing, to more tough guy shit, you know, and it reflected the people that wrote. So some guys just wanted to be sort of tagger dudes, and there's nothing wrong with that. But, you know, throw a little style in there, you know, that's the way I looked at it. And just some of the attitudes of shit. Some guys were great, you know, and they were really into it. But it was just one of those things. I noticed that people became a bit more pack mentality, as in, like, you know, it's sort of more individual, people doing something amazing, more groups of people, not necessarily crews, but lots of hangers on, more crime, more, I suppose, people getting robbed and that sort of association, but less positive kind of outlook, if it makes any sense. Like, some guys were really good and they still were into all that shit. Some guys were just idiots, so I just kept away, you know, easier.
So would you say around that time is, because, you know, it's no secret that the element of beef, you know, either has been or is quite prevalent in the graffiti culture. Yeah. Because you got crews, people going over each other. Yeah. You know, certain people run certain yards.
More like a 90s thing for me. That's what I remember. You know, it might have been different because I didn't live in Adelaide. I lived in the country, and I went to Melbourne, returned, lived there for a bit longer, then moved to Adelaide. By the time I got to Adelaide, I kind of disconnected from, like, the bench had kind of dispersed, your writer's bench had dispersed. It wasn't like when I used to come up here on a Friday night, you would meet down in Rundle Street, certain spot in the mall. In the early 80s, you used to meet at Myers. There was all these different spots. All that had kind of gone away, and everyone had gone off into their own groups. And I just noticed there were just a lot more people that just didn't really bring a lot to the party, but they had a lot of vocal exercise, like just crapping on and just, I don't know, full of shit, I suppose you'd call them. But, you know, there were some incredible dudes doing stuff, and I sort of miss those bench days. We'd show the photos, you'd go and find a piece, not just jump on the internet and look it up. You'd have to go and catch a train to find the spot. Same with getting paint. It was nothing at fingertips. All this shit had to be kind of worked out, and not everyone would tell each other. You know, it's kind of, you had to work out a lot for yourself. And if you got along well with someone, they might give you a bit of info, but a lot of it was, you know, finding out a lot of stuff yourself. So, yeah.
The lesson. Oh yeah.